Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Licensing Committee meeting. Just a few points before we start. If could you switch your mobile phones off or put them on silent if you have a mobile phone? And if you hear the fire alarm, please follow the green signs on the chamber, and everyone will meet in the car park outside the police station, the Brown car park. What I'd like to do, I'll introduce myself, and I'll ask everyone on the table if they'll introduce themselves. So I'm Councillor Neil Waite, Chairman of Licensing. On my left,
Councillor Alan Jones.
Councillor Steve Brooks.
Councillor Robert Kemp.
I'm Steve Bendel, Team Leader Licensing.
Karen Mayo, Democratic Services.
thank you. I think Steve want to introduce Rachel to us.
Yeah, if I can introduce Rachel Honey-Morris to the committee before we start. As you know, the last committee I introduced Nick Hilton, who was coming back to us. The police have had another reorganisation, so Rachel is now going to be our police licensing liaison officer.
Thank you. Well, we go on to item agenda number 1, apologies for absence.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Graham, Seaborn and Tomlinson.
Item number 2, declaration of interest. Has anyone got a declaration of interest? If so, could they declare it, please? If not, we'll move on. Sorry, Tim.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to say I've not been made aware of any potential declarations. Just to remind members that if they've got any questions, please ask me now, or if it arises during the course of the committee, then we'll deal with it then. And any declarations should be recorded in the attendance register, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. We now move on to item agenda 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the 30th of April 2014. That's on pages 5 to 10. If we go through it page by page, I'll start with page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Thank you. That takes us on to item agenda 4, minutes of the previous licensing hearings. Licensing hearings to be confirmed as an accurate record. That's pages 11 to 14. Start on page 11, 12, 13, 14. Could someone move those, please?
I'll move it. I'll second that.
Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 5, minutes of the sub-licensing committee, pages 15 and 16. These were deferred at the last meeting because we didn't have enough people that attended the meeting. So, but I think that's changed now. So we'll start on page 15. And 16. Myself. Thank you, Jenna. Right, on item agenda 6 is the committee report taxi policy amendments 2015, which are on pages 15 and 16. And I'd like Steve, if Steve would introduce this. Please, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Today I'm asking the committee to approve the final version of the taxi policy. I introduced this policy to the committee in the last meeting to approve it to go out to consultation. So the committee are familiar with the changes that had to be made, in particular in relation to the changes that were brought into force by the Deregulation Act of 2015, which changed the time period that some licences lasted, and also the fact that we needed to have a look at the protection of vulnerable adults, particularly following the Louise Casey report in Rotherham. And all of that is set out in the report, the reasons for the changes. We had the consultation, which the committee approved at the last meeting. It was posted up on the MySay website, Torvine, and we actually sent letters. In fact, we sent 2 consultation letters out to the trade in particular, because they're the ones who are going to be affected by this. And those letters that we sent out to the trade are attached to Appendices B and C to show that we're highlighting the changes that we were making to the existing policy, which was first came into force in 2013. There was only one response, which was quite concerning to a certain extent. However, both licensing officers, myself, whenever we spoke to anyone in the licence trade, we did actually check to see that they'd received it. And they had received it, they just didn't see any need to respond. So we were happy that they had actually received it and seen it. The only response is attached at Appendix D, and as you can see, that's merely talking about what the cost implication would be for the taxi trade. And there is a cost implication to the taxi trade because that's built into the fee setting, which is already being done. The second letter that I sent out, you'll see that there was a couple of minor changes to the policy based on a couple of things that came up, and also it was more to do with the fee structure that would come into place from the 1st of October. The committee has not been asked to set the fee structure. The fee structure has been approved by our scheme of delegation by the Chief Officer. And in fact, the advertisement, which is required by law, goes into the newspaper today. So there's a newspaper advert starting as from today for 1 month, where the trade can come back and challenge the fees that the Chief Officer has set. Should they be a challenge to the fees, then it will come before a licensing committee. But just to give the members a heads up, that will be before the 1st of October. It will have to be. Therefore, it will have to be a special meeting in order to consider it if there are challenges to the fees. Therefore, I'm asking the committee today to approve the commencement of the policy to take effect from the 1st of October. The policy, with all the amendments, is attached to Appendix A, and all of the amendments that have been made are highlighted in the policy for members' information. And that is my request, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Ray?
Steve, can you just clarify one thing? On page 777, this is just to prove I've actually read all this. If you have a look at 12.2, the major traffic offences, it gets down to MS60, offences not covered by other codes. What does that actually mean?
That is a very, very good question. This was,
as all of mine are.
this was the policy, the amendments that were made by the committee earlier on when we changed the fitness criteria. We did that about three meetings ago, and this was put in as part of the fitness criteria. I will certainly get back to you and tell you what it is.
The way I read that, if this offence is not covered by other codes, it means everything.
It could be. But it is a code. It is a code which would appear on the driving licence. So some of the minor ones, like your speeding, would be an SP code. So I don't know. I'm looking at Councillor Brooks to see if he can help me.
It is. It's put there. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There we are. It's put there. It's to cover everything that is not taken for. There's a lot of stuff that comes in the small print. Particularly in respect of public service vehicle drivers, buses and in our case, where the other place where I work, things like trains and all of the rest of this. And that's why it's put there. And now you're going to ask me what it means. And I could tell you, if I put the computer on this in here, I could tell you, but I don't think you want to know.
So I take the gist of that is that we've got codes for everything, but if something has not got a code, then it's covered by that. Yeah. It may not have a code for penalty point purposes or something. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Sorry, Councillor Kemp?
Yes. It's in regarding your actual report. If I can draw your attention to 5.6, the licensing team is currently working with Torvine Training to create a training package for all drivers and operators, which is going to be mandatory, if you like. The fact that driving licenses will now have a duration of 3 years, is this a one-off training course, or will they have to come back in 3 years for an update?
I was going to deal with this in the quarterly report, but I'll deal with it now and then skip it in the quarterly report. The training is being arranged. We're working closely with Torvine Training at the moment. In fact, I've got another meeting. I've got to arrange another meeting with them now to finalise what we're going to do. What we're going to do is that every driver will be required, every currently licensed driver will be required to do this training as soon as we've got it all set up, and they'll be given a time limit in which to complete that training. That's actually built into this policy, that it will be mandatory. Should they fail to take up the training, and then we would consider reviewing their licences to have them suspended until they've done the training. Because it's important that every driver actually does this, the same as it was the training I did for the committee members, as you know. What will happen is once every driver has been trained, we are then looking at having a regular training session, especially for new drivers. But the recommendation is that this training should be refreshed every 2 years. But what we're thinking is that it should be refreshed every 3 years in line with our renewals. So that's what we're looking at, because obviously things will change. So we've got to look at this as to the logistics. As soon as I have all the logistics, there will be a separate report coming to this committee to approve the training session. Because whilst I put it in here as a general term in our policy, it will say that whatever is approved by the committee. So the committee will have the opportunity to review and approve it as well. And of course the committee members will have the opportunity to attend it if they wish. This will be quite useful, yeah? So we're still in the early stages at the moment. I think the next meeting will be to actually get some structure to what we're going to do. But it's going to take a few months before we're actually up and running with this, so we can't implement it until we've got the full thing up and running. Okay.
Yes, Councillor Brooks.
I take on board what has just been said to us. I think it is essential that the taxi drivers received, first of all, the training, and then that it is refreshed, because traffic regulations seem to change quite often, and it is important, given what has happened, thank goodness, elsewhere, not here, that we are ahead of the game. And with that in mind, I would move that we accept this report, adopt it, and allow the team to get on with whatever is necessary now by law in order to introduce this.
I would second that.
Thank you. That's proposed and seconded. Now we move on to agenda item number 7, pages 95 to 102. Again, I'll ask Steve if you introduce this report this morning.
Thank you, Chair. This report, although it's talking about an amendment to the taxi policy, this is something which is slightly separate to the approval of the main policy as it stands. But it would be quite useful if this decision is made today before we start printing the policy. This has come about with this council and many other councils across the UK have had conditions in their licences, all worded slightly differently, with regards to access to passengers, how passengers gain access to seats within the vehicle. And in particular, it looks at vehicles which are constructed to carry maybe 8 passengers, which are the small minibus type vehicles, where in order to gain access to the rear set of seats, at the very back of the vehicle, one of the seats in the middle row has to be moved or tilted. The view of licensing officers and most licensing officers across the UK in the past is this is not acceptable, because if an incident happened and that seat was not able to be tilted because it had been damaged for some reason, that the people in the back couldn't escape from a vehicle in an emergency. And also it can cause difficulty with people with mobility problems, is another issue. So our current condition in the policy, and it's still in the policy which you have seen and approved today, is shown in paragraph 4.1. The 3 parts there, H, I and J, those letters are not mistyped. They are the paragraph numbers in our policy. So they're directly in relation to the paragraph numbers in our policy. And as you can see, that it doesn't allow access to a vehicle where the seat has to be tilted, swiveled or moved. And what we've done in the past is we've always asked for that seat to be removed. And rather than me trying to explain it, I have tried to explain it in words in the policy. It's much easier to look at the photographs that I've taken on page 99 onwards. And as you can see, this is a typical layout of a small people carrier small minibus, whereby you've got a row of 3 seats in the back, which are quite perfectly adequate to carry adults. We've got no issues with the seats themselves, but in order to access them, a seat has to be tilted. Now, in the past, that seat which is tilted, which you can see on page 99, and there's other photographs that show you the difference, we've made them remove it, so that they cannot license this vehicle to carry 8 passengers. They can only license it to carry 7. All right. Now, in this particular case, this gentleman has bought this vehicle. He has currently licensed it for 5, because what we've done, we've disabled the back row of seats, so they cannot access those back row of seats. But he is insisting he wants to license it for 8 people, and he's prepared to challenge our policy on it. So what I'm doing to start with is asking the committee if they want to keep this in the policy. This is the issue that we have. Now, what the committee would have to consider with regards to this condition in the policy, in the first instance, is think about it like a health and safety risk assessment. What is the risk itself? What is the potential for someone being trapped in there and being injured as a result of not being able to get out? And what is the likelihood of that risk? Now, I've said quite clearly in my policy that however unlikely the risk is still there. So that is the way that I've put that across to you. But obviously it's a decision that you have to discuss between yourselves and make. But there is another side to this. Some councils have been challenged on this policy, and in particular I'm going to use Swansea City Council as an example because it's local to us in the same sort of locality. They have been taken to court twice, appealing against the decision of the licensing panels or licensing subcommittees not to grant a licence for 8 seats to vehicles such as this. They have lost twice and had costs awarded against them. They have now removed the policy, that condition from their policy, and have replaced it with the condition which you can see in paragraph 5.4. That condition in paragraph 5.4 is fairly non-specific and leaves a lot to be interpreted when we are dealing with our licence holders. However, it's not said, I haven't mentioned it in this report because I only got the answer after I wrote the report. But Swansea have told me they will now licence vehicles such as you see in the photograph at the back. So they will now licence that vehicle. But they're still keeping that non-specific condition in the policy. I did canvass a number of councils around the area, but unfortunately I get very few replies. Blaenau Gwent in particular came back and said that their vehicle examiner would not allow those vehicles to be licensed because they consider it not safe because people can't get out, which is exactly the argument that I've produced. And they have got a condition which is shown in paragraph 5.5, which is, again, it's not particularly specific, but it just gives, if I was looking at replacing the conditions we have at the moment, it would be my preferred wording because at least it gives us something to work with. We ourselves are not in favour of non-specific conditions. The conditions we've got in our policy at the moment were actually rewritten when we had the policy redone and approved in 2013 because we were having arguments with our customers about what that condition meant and was it really saying that. So when we did the policy back in 2012, which was approved to start in 2013, that condition that we're looking at now was rewritten in order to make it specific. It's made it ever so easy for us because this is what it says, this is what we do, and there's no argument about it. So we're not in favour of non-specific conditions. However, we have to look at every case on its own merits because that's just normal legal practice for anything in licensing law, and particularly with policies. In 5.7, 5.6, I've outlined a couple of other issues that, of course, these vehicles, any vehicle used on the roads in Great Britain or across Europe now, there used to be a vehicle approval done by the DSA. Now it's done by the European type approval. So all these vehicles are European type approved and considered to be safe to be used on the roads. And this is the argument that we're coming up against in the courts. So the Department of Transport would not support us in trying to retain this condition. It doesn't appear in their guidance that this is a condition that should be considered. So the condition that we have at the moment, I'm asking the committee, should we retain it? And I say, however unlikely, this could expose the rear seat passengers to a risk if they're trapped in the vehicle and can't get out because they can't move that seat. And it is only one seat in these vehicles as well. So although there's two sliding doors, only one of the seats tilt. So I'm asking the committee to consider the condition and then make a decision on how they think that this policy should read as from today. I mean, the first option I'm giving you is that the condition remains in the policy in its current form. The second option I'm saying is the condition is amended as detailed in paragraph 5.5, or the condition is removed completely. Those are the three options I'm giving the committee. It's a very difficult one because there are arguments on both sides, as you can see. I've had to put this across. This is why it's come to committee in this way. And I think that the knock-on with this will be whatever the committee decide today will then have a knock-on at where we take this individual who wants to license this for 8. He will have to come back to a licensing panel to put his case across, and then we'll have to take it from there and see whether he then decides to challenge us in the courts and take us through that system to appeal against the decision, any decision the panel may make. So this is where we are at the moment with it. I can really say no more than this, other than the fact that I'm asking members to discuss this, weigh up the risks on both sides, the risk to safety, the risks of legal litigation, and to decide how we move forward with our policy.
Councillor Jones?
Steve, you mentioned the Department of Transport. Could you reiterate and just explain a bit more on that with regard to...
The Department of Transport have guidelines for licensing taxis. There are only guidelines. It's only a guidance document, so it's not based in law in any way. And they do not mention anything to do with that in vehicle conditions. That's why they will not mention it. They're rewriting their guidelines at the moment based on the Deregulation Act, but they're not going to change that. That's as much as I can say on that. So if we were to go to the department, well, I know that other councils have gone to the Department of Transport, and the Department for Transport will not support that condition.
Councillor Mills?
Yeah, whilst I personally would like it to stay as it is, I feel seeing Swansea have been taken to court twice and lost and been awarded costs. We don't want to go down that road because I think we have no alternative, and I would recommend that we adopt paragraph 5.5.
Question before we go to about regarding the pictures, Steve, if you like. The vehicle that you're showing here, in regarding the two doors, call it the rear doors, it has accessibility on both sides. And so, in regarding an 8 vehicle, person seated vehicle or proposed, are all vehicles got 2 rear sliding doors, or just the one to begin with?
Right. The only vehicles that we licence are what they call Class M. Now, there are 2 classes of vehicles with DVLA. There's N, November, M, Mike. Class M is passenger carrying vehicles. Class N are goods vehicles. So if you looked at a panel van that the builders use, it'll only have 1 door. If you look at the Class M vehicles, which are passenger carrying vehicles, they've always got 2 doors because they have the access for passengers. So every vehicle we licence, one of the other conditions in our policy is that all vehicles will be 4-door vehicles. All right. So these comply with that condition because they have got 4 doors. So they've got the driver and passenger opening door at the front, and then the 2 sliding doors at the side. So they do comply with that condition with the 4 doors. What the issue is purely around whether or not we're going to allow vehicles to give access with these tilting seats. Now, there are lots of other vehicles out there. There are some vehicles which are longer wheelbase, and those doors actually slide back further. And because that door opening is wider, they can't do it on the short wheelbase, because otherwise the door would slide back and hang over the back of the vehicle. So with the longer wheelbase vehicles, this doesn't become an issue. And we have got some transits which were longer wheelbase. And in fact, they actually work with this gentleman who's bought this, and he knows what we do with regards to this. But this particular issue is not that. But so it depends on the layout of the vehicle. We will assess each vehicle on its own merits. Now, this is the first time that this particular make of vehicle has come up. But there's 4 Tornios which have always had this issue, and in particular now these Vauxhall Marivas. This is a Vauxhall Mariva vanny, whatever they call them. So this is the type of vehicle we're looking at. They're all very much of a muchness, and they've all got this tilting seat configuration. Whether it be in this case. It's more difficult for this gentleman because in most cases, in the transits, this seat is an individual seat and can be removed as one seat. In this case, the seat squabs are continuous. It's a 3-seat. So you'd have to take all 3 seats out and buy a 2-seat to go in.
If I can continue there, though, then, in regarding this is a new vehicle, but the fact that, and at the moment we're talking about the single tilting seat, for me, the key thing is the accessibility to the back seats. Can you get tilted double seats? In other words, all the seats in the middle row would be able to tilt forward, and the people in the back row would be able to have access out or egress, from both sides of the vehicle.
Right. I think I know where this particular seat you see here, the back tilts forward, and that's the only bit of that seat that moves. Right, the doubles don't. Now, but what I can tell you is, and this isn't going to be in any way helpful to the discussion, is that the whole of that 3 can be tilted from the floor up. However, if you only need one person sat in that seat or something gone wrong, and if you're sat in the back and you're in a difficult situation, trying to lift the 3 seats, that's even worse. I mean, as it stands at the moment, it's one small lever to tilt that seat forward. The issues we've always thought of is, number one, if it's in an accident and that mechanism goes wrong, that seat is not going to tilt. If it's in an accident and the person in that seat is injured and cannot move, you can't move the seat to get past. And those are our arguments, have always been our arguments for keeping it. But as far as other configurations of seats, I'm sure that Vauxhall would do anything for money. But we're talking about an awful lot of money here that the trade are not going to stump up. That's the reality of the situation.
Councillor Brooks?
Yeah. Can I just be quite clear? There were two cases appealed against Swansea. Swansea County Council won that, didn't they? They lost it. So the appeals were upheld. Right.
Case law then?
That is now case law and precedent. So therefore, that's what we go with. And the persons who made that decision, which would be my colleagues, who made that decision, then they effectively become liable for making that. We, as a licensing authority, would make a statement that we believe this to be unsafe. And that's the way for it to go forward. I don't think that we should have been discussing in any way any particular case that could come before us, because it now rules the five of us out of sitting on any appeal that would be made against us, because we now know about it. But the key thing to all of this is about safety. Now, what we have here is the Department of Transport, it seems, deciding to opt out and not make a decision. And it's the old story, isn't it? Right? But it comes back down to a local panel like this to make the decision. Get it wrong, and you're the monster. Now, everything has been done to go as far as the Department of Transport, who it seems, we are advised today, actually refused to make a decision on it. And I think that at this particular moment in time, that every application in respect for 8-seater carriage taxis should be a complete separate application, and, if necessary, dealt with the committee on each time, because there aren't that many of them in the county borough of Torvine. And then that way, there are vehicles which are manufactured in such a way that would meet the criteria. And what we've got to be doing is encouraging people to buy the vehicles that meet the criteria. Because at the end of the day, the taxi operator, the taxi driver, in the event of an accident, because this may only occur as a result of an accident, it could also occur, for example, if somebody were to have a heart attack in this third seat, how the hell would the medical people get out? Now, my view is a simple one. At the end of the day, somebody somewhere has to take responsibility. And today's culture is that if we can find a local council or the government or anybody else to take responsibility, that sounds pretty good. That's not good enough for me. And I think myself that the people who operate these vehicles must be fully aware of our concerns of the possible dangers to passengers, and we should make our decisions upon that. If they then want to appeal a decision which they do not agree with, I got no axe to grind with them doing that, because it moves it up the line, and then somebody else has to go into it in detail, and they have to make an appropriate decision on it, based upon the evidence which is given. The way which this is being formulated at the present moment, for me, falls into passing the buck, quite frankly. Personally, I would have the confidence to support that we turn round and say we will not register vehicles that are not safe for people to get in and out of. As simple as that. If somebody wishes to take that to appeal, they have every right to do so. And we would then put the same argument forward with regard to it. The argument would be a simple argument, that we don't believe it to be safe. Now, we read in here that the Blaenau Gwent vehicle examiner, he won't allow them to go through anyway. So they've been challenged up there, and it's fair to say, no, they haven't. So, personally, from a personal point of view, and a member of this panel, I would always want to err on the side of safety. Because if anything goes wrong here, and we have compromised on this, quite rightfully, we will be held accountable for it. So I would move that we don't licence such vehicles where examiners imply in any way, shape or form that the vehicle is not fit for purpose.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
Well, what I'm saying effectively is that we do not licence these vehicles unless they are safe to be licensed. It's as simple as that. If the vehicle examiner is saying that it is not safe for people to get in and out of these vehicles, then that's it. It's turned down.
Are you putting in a third option? Option?
What I'm going to do is to go to the professionals to decide on the way in which they want to word this. I'm simply saying that we should not register vehicles which are not safe. I don't think anybody would thank us for doing that, quite frankly.
No.
Councillor Jones.
So really speaking, you're making a fourth recommendation.
If it's taken that way, you know, I would accept it like that. I don't want to... But the thing about it is, as soon as people start saying to me that there's compromises on safety and all of the rest of that, I have spoken on this morning, and this is probably being recorded, so everyone will be aware of what I've said. And at the end of the day, if it's unsafe, then it's unsafe. We shouldn't be using it.
Chair, if it's unsafe, then surely we've got to possibly devote to option number 1, which basically to leave it as it is, if you like, because everything that you've stated there is encompassed in the H, I and J, if you like, and so I'm in support with everything that you've said there. If you like, at the end of the day, we as a council have got to the right and obligation to protect the residents, and so from my point of view, I'm going down the road of leaving it exactly where it is. And if you like, a person wants to appeal it, if you like, then they have the right to do that, doing it the right and proper way through the right and proper channels.
Councillor Jones.
What's the licence officer's view on this latest recommendation?
I mean, the fact that I put that condition in the policy not too many years ago would suggest that we felt it was necessary to keep it there. However, I have to point out the other argument, which is the fact that it's not being supported and councils are losing the argument in the Magistrates' Court. I would like to just point out one thing that was said, that it's not case law as such. It is a precedent set by magistrates. It is not case law as such. It is just the magistrates made a decision to uphold the appeal against Swansea City Council. But yeah, it's a very difficult one. This is why I've been fairly straight with how I've delivered it, because I can give you an argument on both sides here. But obviously, when we've had that in our policy in some form or other ever since I've been in licensing, and a long time before. It was rewritten in 2013 or 2012 and approved in 2013 in order to make it very clear what our position was with it, and it was done for a very good reason.
Councillor Kemp.
If it's not case law, and I've taken on your comments then, for me, if like, it strengthens my thoughts in regarding what I had previously said, is the fact that, if you like, it can be taken to appeal when it will be treated completely separate at the end of the day.
Steve, do you have an idea how many of these vehicles actually are in use in Torvine?
I couldn't give you an exact number, but I think we have got quite a few. Do you know off the top?
Do you mean with? Do you mean we have no vehicles that have tilting seats at the moment?
No.
None at all. We've insisted that they are either removed or we just simply won't license them.
But we've got vehicles that, if this condition is changed, where we've made them remove seats, and I don't know how many there are, but there are vehicles out there which would, if this condition was changed, would be able to put their seat back in. All right, so there are a number of vehicles that we have licensed. There are 4 Tonios I bring particularly to mind because seem to be the popular ones. But I don't know how many there are at the moment. But if this condition is changed and we do allow this to take place and license them for 8, then there will be a number of vehicles out there that will put that 8th seat back in, and we would have no option but to license them for 8.
Councillor Mills.
Can I ask you, do you know where Swansea lost and the appeal was upheld and they were awarded costs? Do you know roughly what those costs were?
I'm afraid I don't. No, I don't.
Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, I think the point that I was making, not as case law, is precedent. And that's what I said. It's precedent. It's happened somewhere else, so therefore you can refer to it. What I'm going to ask is for our licensing officer to pick up the precedent from both cases. And let's be aware of what happened, because we don't know what occurred on that time. But as I said earlier, without repeating myself at the end of the day, as long as we have demonstrated that we have discussed this in some detail and that the key option is always based upon the safety of the passengers, that's the key thing about it. And then if somebody else at the end of the day doesn't support that view, that's fine by me, because I'm sure that if an incident occurred, that may well be mentioned that this is what the council recommended, that was overturned by another, and that's what you come with. At least the council can be seen to having been acting in a responsible manner, and that's based about all we can do. Today, we live in a society where somebody has to be held accountable for everything that's going on. So we must protect, the people that we represent, because any costs which are awarded against the council in things like this being actually awarded against the people of the county borough of Torfaen, because they effectively pick up the bill in the end.
Can I propose? I'm going to propose, because it's the way I'm thinking, that we leave it as it is. I don't know if any of the councillors would be prepared to second me or not.
I'd be prepared to second that, because it covers all the issues, and the point, I think, is well made, and it's what the licensing officer is suggesting that we should do, and has demonstrated that for the last 2 years it's worked.
I'm quite happy to withdraw my original.
What we're going to recommend is the first condition. Everyone agree with that? Fine. Thank you very much. So we move on to item agenda 8, Licensing Committee Quarterly Reports 2015, page 103 to 222.
All right, thank you, Chair. This will be quite quick. It looks like a lot of paperwork, but there's 2 big policies in there, so I assure you this won't take as long as the last one. I'm asking the committee, this is the first quarter of this financial year report, just to update the members on what has happened. I'm going to go over some of these points very quickly. You can read what's in there yourselves. There's no need for me to go into any specific detail. But I'm asking the committee to note the contents of the report, note and comment on the proposed policy for the Licensing Act, note and comment on the proposed policy for the Gambling Act, and note the activity report. There's nothing much to hear. There's a couple of things I will run over. The alcohol and entertainment licensing, you can see that there's been a few issues there. Joint visits have been conducted with police officers in order to sort out some very minor complaints that we've received. Nothing major at the moment. But the policy itself, The Licensing Act 2003 policy consultation has concluded. You can see at the top of page 104 what the responses that we had to that policy, which were very useful. You'll see that Aneurin Bevan University Health Board had quite a big influence on some major areas of this policy, which is the first time that the Health Authority have got really involved, because they are now responsible authorities. They obviously haven't got a health objective yet, and I say yet in inverted commas because I know there's a push to have one, but they're now getting very, very involved with anything to do with licensing, which is a positive thing. And we've had several working groups with them with data sharing exercises, and we're now getting data from the Health Board about alcohol-related incidents, which may help us with looking at pubs and clubs, etc. So the proposed policy is now complete, is ready for approval by the full council, which is going to go to full council on the 22nd of September. But what I'm asking the committee is, before I put that report to the full council, have you got any comments on that policy before it's put to the full council?
Members, have you any comments?
Right. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Moving on to 5.2, the usual busiest area we have, Hackney Carriage and private hire licensing. Lots of various complaints and issues have been brought up there, but all, as you can see, listed in that, summarised in 5.2.1. And I've already gone into the child sexual exploitation and taxi licensing, the fact that we're working with Torvine Training, so I can skip over that bit. I did that in the policy thing. Is there any comment at all on Hackney Carriage private hire licensing from members before I move on?
Sorry, can you just clarify the bit where he took 2 passengers to share without both agreeing?
Yeah. It is a condition, particularly with Hackney carriages, that it's actually in the legislation that you cannot take two. You can take 2 passengers, but both passengers have to agree to sharing the cab. And on that occasion, they didn't. All right, it's as simple as that. Yeah. Again, a minor thing, but one of the passengers wasn't happy about it, and they weren't asked permission. So, yeah.
Councillor Brooks?
Yes, I'll just turn around and say that it's refreshing to see that there are only 9 complaints. I imagine that during this period there must have been a huge many thousands of passenger movements, and to have 9 reported, I think, is very much at the right end of the scale. None at all, of course, would be perfect, but we've got to live in the real world. So I think that's good, and I think it's down as well to the licence department's policing and the policing of Gwent Police as well. So I think it's really ought to go down as a well done to everybody, to be honest, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
Can I go back? I'm sorry about this. Can I go back to 5.1, where it states there are 4 minor complaints, and yet one of the complaints is an assault, which is ongoing by the police. Would you class an assault as a minor?
No. Yeah, the thing is with that, it was the allegation was made by a customer that he was assaulted by the door staff that were working that night. What it was is he was ejected for using drugs in the toilet and didn't like being ejected and was trying all sorts to try and... could I say that the investigation by the police has not gone nowhere, is more of a vexatious complaint. So, no, an assault is not minor, but on this occasion it was not something that we were going to go we had to put it in context. Does that make sense? Right, the next one is the gambling, gaming and lotteries. You'll see we've actually dealt with a new betting premises licence, but that was purely Betfred, who are moving from their current place in Pontypool. They're just moving about 4 doors up into a bigger premises and closer to the town centre. Although I am aware that there is going to be Ladbrokes, I believe it is going to be putting in an application for a betting shop in the middle of Pontypool very soon. Their premises is almost ready for occupation. But that's I am in touch with them on that. The statement of licensing policy are very much the same as I said for the Licensing Act policy. The gambling policy will be going for approval at full council on the 20th of October. This one is on a time scale whereby it has to be in place at the end of January 2016. So I don't want this to go quite so quickly to council, and I can't get one later in the year. So all I'm asking the committee to look at the policy, and have you got any comments before I submit the report to full council in October? No. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to smoking in enclosed public spaces. We've had one fixed penalty for a driver in this quarter, or one complaint, and he's apparently smoking an e-cig, which are starting to become more and more common, as I think a lot of you realise now. They seem to be everywhere, and the controversy around them. And I think the Wales Health Bill, which is going through the Welsh Government at the moment, is going to even tackle e-cigs in a lot of places as well, and class enclosed spaces the same for them. I've seen a draft of that bill and had a presentation on it, and there's quite a lot in there which is going to affect licensing in the future. One complaint in street trading, which is being dealt with. We're hoping that person will apply for consent or just stop trading. We give them one opportunity before we take any formal action. Scrap metal, we've granted 2 licences following representations from the police, and we've revoked 1 licence following the information that a licence holder was recently convicted of a relevant offence of stealing metal. It's only for information for this panel, because obviously it's not a function that this panel has, this committee has responsibility for, but I'd like to keep you up to date with what we're doing. And the biggest part of this one is our prosecutions and appeals. As you can see, we had a trial in Cumbrian Magistrates Court for a scrap metal dealer who failed to produce records of scrap metal. And he appeared at the first hearing, entered a not guilty plea. However, he didn't attend for the actual trial itself. So the case was heard in his absence, and the case was proved. The magistrates decided they were going to impose the maximum fine for him on the first offence. As you can see, it's quite a significant amount. So I don't know whether he will challenge that sentence at some stage, but we will have to wait and see. But that was quite, and we had our full costs awarded as well. We've also mentioned in previous reports that we have a driver that we're taking to court for refusing to take a fare. Refusing to drive is the actual wording of the legislation under the old 1847 Act. He's entered a not guilty plea. He's employed a solicitor from Bristol, and the trial date has been set for the 10th of August 2015. And in this case, we are actually instructing counsel to take the prosecution for us. I've got to point out 5.8.4 with regards to the appeal that's been ongoing for some considerable time now. The driver, Mr. Nicky James, who this panel suspended his licence last December for 6 months following allegations of inappropriateness and breach of policy. The appeal hearing was adjourned and adjourned again a couple of times. We've been to court on this one more times than I care to remember. But anyway, the hearing eventually took place last month on the 25th of June at Caerphilly Magistrates Court. At the hearing, we had all of our witnesses attend, even the ones that didn't attend our panel hearing. Every single one attended that gave evidence, plus a couple of extras with the information that had come up post that. And as a result, once he saw all the witnesses there, he had a chat with his legal team. They decided to withdraw the appeal, So that means that the decision of this panel wasn't challenged, although we've spent a lot of money going to court and employed a counsel on our behalf. However, the good point about this is that because they withdrew the appeal, the magistrates awarded our full costs, including for our counsel. So they've awarded it to be paid at £10 a week. But that's a few years he'll be paying back that £2,500.
Sorry, Tim, can I just clarify that? Because I was on that panel, I don't have to declare an interest or anything, do I?
Not in relation to this, as I see it, gentlemen. This is simply reporting how the case has progressed since. It's not as a fresh decision for us here today.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, but I've got to point out as well, the last paragraph, which is on page 106 of that particular section, is there was a representation made by Mr. James Solicitor that in the committee minutes report that I presented to this panel in January with the ongoing issues with regards to this trial, this hearing, I nearly did it again, with this hearing, I referred to it in the committee report as a trial. Mr. James Solicitor, Mr. Roger James, who was Mr. Nicky James Solicitor, actually said it's not a trial and it was a misrepresentation. Well, he's absolutely correct. It's not a trial because it's a civil matter. It's a hearing. But what we've agreed to do, because he made a complaint to us, is I'm putting the record straight in this report that it was basically a description of what was happening. It is a civil hearing appeal, not a trial, because a trial denotes it's a criminal matter, which it is not. Okay. Licensing team performance, I've attached the figures at Appendix C. I'm not going to go into any detail in them at the moment. You can see what we've been doing. As you can see, we spent a lot of time in court in this quarter. With lots of other things going on, and there's a lot of panel hearings coming up, as I'm sure that many members here are aware of and have happened. So we have been quite busy in other respects, and I make no comment on those at the moment. Basically, Chair, that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Vendel.
Chair, can I come in, though? I know you said that you don't want to go into Appendix C, but I think in some cases I think it's important too, if you like, if that's okay with the Chair. In regarding, I know that we're in quarter one, but if we can turn to page 219, if you like. I know there's certain measures which are in place. Now, I'm not sure if these are statute measures which have come down from up above, if you like, or whether there are measures. But in regarding quarter one, there's an awful lot of zeros as such, and the fact that in some cases there's no key performance indicators or targets in the rest of the reports. In this particular page, there are. And so my concern is basically, we realise that you have a small team now, and my concern is, are you going to fulfil these targets, knowing that we're even in quarter one, and in some cases, we haven't done any, if you like.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think that at the end, when I did the end of year last year, which was the last committee, I made it clear that I was keeping the performance targets the same for this year, purely so that I've got something which is on an even keel, so I know where we are on a comparable basis. I didn't expect to achieve the targets this year, and it was not an expectation that we will. However, the reason I've kept the targets the same is, as you know, that one of my team is on maternity leave. She will be returning in November. Now, until such time as I get the full team as it is back, I can't it would be wrong of me to reduce the targets now and then have to readjust them again. I would rather say, let's keep all the targets the same. They're not statutory targets. They're targets which have been put in place as a team for us to measure our own performance against. They're not statutory. They don't go anywhere. They go on Finon, obviously, for the scrutinies to assess. And for the Chief Officer to answer questions on. So they are purely imposed by the team in order to give us a target to work towards. Now, as you know, last year we did fairly well, but this year we've got quite a few months where we're really down on staff. We've got Claire who's on maternity leave, but she returns on the 1st of November, and that's going to change the dynamics quite considerably. So it would be wrong of me to change the targets for a temporary absence of a significant period. So I'm leaving them the same as they are. But
I've accepted what you've said there. I think they call it if not a graph, call it the matrix or whatever. I think it needs to be supported with some form of narrative, if you like, because obviously there's zeros, but it doesn't give an explanation in regarding why there's so many zeros.
Yeah, I accept that, Councillor. I accept that. What I will say is what we did, and as I said, I reported this at the end of the last quarter report, that we're concentrating on what we're considering our high-risk targets whilst we're short of staff. Our high-risk targets at the moment are scrap metal dealers and taxi vehicles in particular. Those are always our high risk. We haven't had the interventions required on alcohol licensing. Yes, we would love to be doing all of these inspections, but they cannot be considered as a high risk at the moment. Any premises that comes to our attention, we are dealing with. And I've mentioned that in the licensing section of this report, where we did have some minor complaints. In fact, I went out with the police officer, that was Nick, who was here before Rachel. I went out with Nick, and we visited these premises. We did intervention with them, etc. So it is, we are doing what is considered to be high risk and on a prioritisation basis. But as I say, with only a couple of staff, it is very difficult.
Can I continue? If we can turn to page 220. I know that we're currently or supposed to be in austerity at the moment, and money is short. And yet, if you like, when it comes to the gambling applications and licences, if you like, there's a considerable increase. I believe it's 28 for the first quarter. Is there any way of measuring or putting or thoughts in regarding whether we should be, if you like, granting more gambling devices or licences, knowing that supposedly there's not that much money out there, and therefore we're putting more and more of our citizens at risk?
That is a very good moral question. Some of these applications are renewals, so they're just ongoing premises which are renewing their licences. So they're not necessarily all new licences. Particularly, you see 3 betting shops on there. Well, basically, there's one new betting shop, but then in time to come, there will be one less because they're going to shut down the one next to them. They've got the 2 licenses running side by side at the moment. So that figure doesn't really represent anything at the moment because we haven't got a new betting shop in Torvine, because this shop is going to move from one place to another, and they've got the 2 licenses running to facilitate that taking place. As far as everything else is concerned, they are renewals. We've got no new betting premises at all, no additional betting premises in Torvine. As far as gaming machines and all the rest are concerned, like I say, they're in pubs, most of them, pubs or clubs, and they've been there for years and years.
Maybe in the future, if we can basically get a bit of narrative or in regarding which is new and which are renewal, I think I'd be happier at the end of the day.
So you've finished, Steve?
That's me done, Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions from any of the members? If not, I'd like to thank everyone for turning up and look forward to seeing you in the next couple of weeks.